And this comes as explosions rock the Lebanese border following Israeli airstrikes. The Lebanese terror group Hezbollah has threatened full-scale war if Israel escalates its violence.
So our security editor, Mark White, has all the latest for you. Mark, can you actually sum up, what is the latest situation? There seems to be a lot going on suddenly.
Every day there are so many different developments. One of the latest is a strike on a refugee camp in central Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. This is the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza, where, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, 30 people have been killed. Now, the Israeli Defense Force have not commented on this other than to say that they are investigating those reports. And of course they reiterate, as they do with every strike where there are reports of civilian casualties, that this is the modus operandi of Gaza, of the Hamas terrorist group. They entrench themselves throughout civil society in Gaza. They run Gaza. They're everywhere in civilian areas, in refugee camps, in hospitals, schools and kindergartens. So when they call in airstrikes, then there are often civilians caught up in this. But the Israelis say that, for weeks now, they have been urging the people of northern Gaza to get south, to head south to the relative safety of southern Gaza, out of the way of the most intense of the bombing. And to that end, actually, the Salah al-Din main road, the main highway from northern Gaza to southern Gaza, was open just for a brief 3 hours yesterday to allow as many residents as could manage to get south. But what the IDF are saying is that just an hour or two into the opening of this highway, remember there are IDF troops on the ground in that area now, the Hamas terrorists took advantage of this and ambushed and attacked IDF forces there along this highway.
Yesterday we were speaking about Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah stopped short of declaring all-out war on Israel, but we've seen overnight dramatic pictures of a huge bombing operation by the IDF inside Lebanon. Might that escalate things to the north?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about the double explosion that you see on the video, that's actually Hezbollah firing more sophisticated rockets at an Israeli Defense Force post, and the Israelis then responded by bombing those Hezbollah positions. I think this was always the fear from Hassan Nasrallah's speech, that although he's not committing to going into the war fully, he doesn't have to. He just needs to signal an uptick in these attacks, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And that causes very significant problems for the Israelis, having to commit tens of thousands of troops to the northern border. But on top of that, there are dozens of communities along that northern border who have had to evacuate and move into the likes of Tel Aviv. Now, that is not sustainable over the long term. So all the while, there is the possibility of escalation and a determination from Israel to get a solution to the northern border issue as well, because the longer it drags on, the more they have hundreds of thousands now of displaced people in their own country as well.
And Mark, can you explain what happened yesterday? Because we were expecting more people to be allowed out through the Rafah Crossing into Egypt, and we were particularly expecting more British nationals to come, but nothing happened, did it?
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult situation down on that crossing, and people think it's just a matter of opening the crossing and letting those on the list through. But Israel needs real guarantees that the people crossing that border are who they say they are, and not Hamas terrorists trying to sneak out of the country into Egypt and to regroup. And there is real concern that some of the injured who were taken over in ambulances, for instance, were actually fighters from Hamas and not civilian casualties. So I think concerns over that led to issues at the border, which meant there were no crossings. And that's deeply disappointing, of course, for the British government, knowing that there were 88 British nationals on a list of about 112 related to the UK yesterday. We know that any given day anyway, a good proportion of these people don't turn up for a variety of reasons, usually because of the safety concerns that they have. But whoever was there and tried to cross yesterday didn't get to cross. I should also just mention the fact that Hamas in the Gaza Strip, still despite all of the relentless air and ground strikes from the IDF, still has a very significant capacity. Here in Tel Aviv, we come under a very significant rocket attack last night. Now, it wasn't immediately in our central sector, so our head of security, Lawrence, was able at the back there, Maher was able at the back of the hotel that we're in on his balcony to get the shots of those Iron Dome missiles going up to intercept the rockets, and it really just does show you the significant weaponry that Hamas still has, and also the capability and the determination to launch these missiles towards Israel.
Really significant point there about the identity of those attempting to cross from the Rafah Crossing into Egypt. We've had security expert Chapman in the studio before saying it's entirely plausible that Hamas will attempt to melt into the civilian population, to flee the country, to escape, to regroup outside. And so there's an incredibly complicated procedure of vetting people, and especially fleeing war-torn zones. They may have no identification. We may not know who they are. So it's an incredibly precarious situation, isn't it, down there?
Yeah, I mean, they are off the people, and they, are part and parcel of everyday life in Gaza. They run Gaza. The Hamas fighters are recruited from the people of Gaza. They're there, and yes, you're right. It's the perfect excuse in a war zone to say you have no documentation when you present yourself in the back of an ambulance at the border badly injured. And it's very difficult for the authorities to then get a handle on who exactly you are. So that's why there is confusion and concern, in the same way that there's constant confusion and concern about the aid supplies coming in. The Israelis are very concerned that because Hamas controls Gaza, that ultimately, if it wants to, it can get its hands on those supplies coming through. And that's why, thus far, we're not seeing fuel supplies going into Gaza, because Israel says it will just go straight down into those tunnels and be used in the manufacturing of weapons and those rockets that are fired constantly towards Israel.
Mark, we'll leave it there for the moment and revisit you a bit later on in the programme. Thanks very much indeed.